Hey guys, how's it going? So today I'm going to talk to you about what it's really like to own a classic car, as well as the pros and cons. So if you're in the market for a classic car, you always wondered what it's like. Hopefully this video will help you out. So let's start off with the pros. So the first thing is this car is a classic. They don't make cars like this anymore. They most likely never will. There's just a cool factor about them. The other thing about this car is you definitely stand out from the crowd. It kind of goes with the first point I had, how it's one of a kind. But I mean, people today don't drive cars like these. Like everyone else drives Toyota Camrys, Honda Civics. Cars like these don't exist anymore. So when you see them, you instantly stand out. The other thing I like about this car is it's pretty simple to work on by yourself if anything goes wrong with it. Now, what I mean by that, this car is big. There's a ton of space. So say you need to work in the engine bay. You just pop the hood open, and unlike modern cars where everything's all cramped, like when I'm working on my Toyota, I can barely reach my master cylinder, right? This car, you have no problem reaching any of the equipment. So that's not an issue. Also, another thing I do love about this car is it's very comfortable to drive in. When you're cruising on the road, 60 miles an hour, it's just so smooth, and these seats are just so comfortable. Like, the seats feel like a couch, like you're sitting on your couch. There's not a lot of padding in them because you can feel the springs in them when you sit on them. It's like the old school seats. It's not like modern cars, the leather upholstery and all that. It's none of that. But although you can still feel the springs, it's quite comfortable when you're sitting still, when you're not moving. One of my favorite things about this car is the fact that you always get complimented on it by people who enjoy these cars. A lot of people I've noticed like older cars more than newer cars. But anywhere I go, usually, if I pull up to a stoplight and it's red, or if I pull up to, a parking lot, people always come up and stare at the car. You always see people staring at this car. This isn't a big deal for me, but it can be important if you're not a good driver. But then again, if you're not a good driver, you shouldn't own one of these cars. This car is made of steel. So meaning if you hit small things, like if you were to park the car and you rolled forward into a telephone pole, or you bumped the car in front of you, you will not hurt this car. The front and back bumpers are steel covered in chrome. So a little fender bender won't damage the car. But the main reason I drive this car is because of the overall cool factor. Like, I love this car. I love the attention that it gets. I love the fact that it's unique. I love the fact that there's none of these around. I haven't seen, as much as I drive this car, because I drive it the most in the summertime. The wintertime, it stays in the garage. But summertime, this time of year, I drive it almost every day. I have not seen another one of these cars. So now I'm going to tell you about the cons of owning this classic car. So one of the big things I've noticed about owning this car is stuff will go wrong with this car. This car has the majority of original equipment on it, which means that they are 42 years old, and usually around that time they begin to fail. So if you're not familiar with cars, if you don't like cars, if you're not a car guy or girl or whatever, if you're not into cars, finding parts to fix the car can prove to be a hard task. Now, the other con about this car is that it's very heavy. This car weighs about 5,200 pounds. Now, put that in perspective, the Honda Civic, Toyota Camry, Ford Fusion weighs about 32, 34, maybe 3,500 pounds. An F-150 I think weighs like 5,700 pounds, maybe, not a little less. So this car is very heavy. The thing about this car, it gets horrible gas mileage. Now, on a good day, this car usually gets, I usually get 10 city, 15 highway. The next thing I'm going to talk about, I got used to shortly after I started driving it a little bit. It's not that hard to get used to, but there's still a learning curve. This car is 20 feet long. So it's 20 feet long and it's as wide as a Hummer H2. So it's pretty damn big. It's pretty massive. It's kind of like parking a pickup truck. Parts will need to be replaced. So the power antenna remanufactured was $300. The Cadillac emblem on the hood, $50. The rubber door seals, or weathering, whatever you want to call them, it's about, what was that, $300 for an entire kit for both of the doors. The rear plastic insert around the tail fins, the complete insert, was about $200. A Coupe de Ville emblem for the rear quarter panel, $50. Air conditioning, $280 for a recharge. If I were to refit it or retrofit it to modern day standards, I'm quoting what the guy said at Rad Air, it would cost thousands. Power steering gearbox, mine is leaking, so I need to get that replaced. $300, and that's a low end estimate. I've gotten estimates for $500, mostly because you have to take apart some pieces, you have to replace the lines, it's a pain in the ass. Heater core, I got that replaced, and that cost me $300. Another thing about this car is it's not as reliable as modern cars today. And obviously that's a no-brainer, but this car just broke 50,000 miles on it. It has 50,093 miles. It did sit in storage for 20 years, which is why the low miles, but you know, 50,000 miles on a new car is absolutely nothing. Like, I would consider buying a new car for 50,000 miles on it. Put in perspective, my Toyota Camry is a 2003 and it has 160,000 miles on it and nothing's wrong with it. If this car had 160,000 miles on it, it would need major repair work done to it. It would need some major mechanical work. It probably need engine work. The transmission would probably need rebuild. Stuff would start falling apart on the inside. These cars were not made to go past 150,000 miles. And I don't have room to store this car. So that means I have to pay someone to store it for me. I gotta put in a garage, and a garage usually costs me about 150 bucks a month, 120 to 150 bucks a month. And I usually have it stored from November to February, maybe November to early March. So those are all the pros and cons I could think of this car. I mean, overall, I love driving this car. It's so cool to drive, it's so fun to drive, but it does come with a lot of cons. And if you were thinking of getting a car like this for a daily driver, I wouldn't recommend it, just because all the cons. I mean, if you could afford this car, I suggest get this car and then get like a old modern beater car, like a Toyota Camry or an old Civic or something like that, just so you could drive around when you're not driving this. But I mean, if you have the money for it, if you're in the market, and I'd say go for it, but keep in mind you're going to spend a lot of money on repairs and miscellaneous stuff and gas. Especially if you want to take road trips in it, you're going to spend a ton of money in gas. But I mean, that's all I got. That's my thoughts on what it's like to drive a classic car, and hopefully you guys enjoyed this, and yeah, thanks for watching.